Bill Gates is one of the richest people in the world. He left Harvard University after 2 years of study, and he created the biggest corporation which serves billions of people. Half of his employees still don't have any degrees. But it's not important. From the start, the company was recruiting people, assessing them by 2 criteria, which remain the same up to now: creativity and teamwork.
Every person develops his own individual style of coping with difficult situations. It might be intellectualization when you reflect on the situation, or anticipatory calculations of some sorts. It might be willpower. It might be analysis of one's own emotions or self-consciousness. A mature person has to know how to deal with his own emotions. It doesn't mean you need to shun emotionality, but it does mean that your emotions don't harm other people and lead you to your goal.
According to the latest research, the success of the modern leader by 80% depends on his emotional intelligence and only by 20% on IQ. That's a massive overbalance. Bill Gates himself showed very high results in emotional intelligence tests.
In any sphere, the better a person understands his emotions and emotions of other people, the better he is able to use them to solve problems, improve efficiency, the bigger success he achieves. It doesn't matter if he works with finances, with people, at stock exchanges, if he's a manager. And to speak about managers, it's actually their most important ability. A person with high emotional intelligence may behave the way he needs to in the process of reaching his goal. It's a mistaken belief that he is such a cutie or the soul of any company. He might be like that, actually, yes, but when he needs it. High level of emotional intelligence is tightly connected with the ability to effectively cope with stressful situations. A person won't explode. He won't expend energy for nothing. He won't start conflicts. But on the other hand, if it's needed for his goal, he will do it.
Our brain always gives priority to emotions. All that we see, hear, smell, and touch through our sensory organs is transformed into electric impulses. They go to the limbic system of the brain, where our emotions are formed. And only then rational and evaluative thinking comes into play. Hence, emotion is always primary. We think that we make logical decisions when actually we justify with logic what our emotions dictate to us. When a decision is almost made, there comes a stage of the final doubts. But it is rather short in people with high emotional intelligence. After analyzing the situation, they simply feel what to do.
For example, there's an American study on the level of interaction between emotional intelligence and successfulness of investment decisions. Basically, this research proves that the higher the emotional intelligence of an investor, the more financially successful decisions he will make. Thus, he invests in projects with a higher certainty of financial return. Emotional intelligence helps a lot to make effective decisions. A person uses information gleaned from emotions. He analyzes it, correlates it with his goal, and makes this decision on the basis of just 2 factors, both emotional and rational. And actually, this combination is what emotional intelligence is all about.
Psychologists claim that a person with high EQ has unconventional thinking, and above all, he is psychologically well-balanced. It means that he is able to bring profit to the company. Today, in many big corporations, the potential employees are tested for emotional intelligence in order not to mistake in the choice of candidate.
Tests on emotional intelligence were created specifically to check people's level of self-understanding, of emotional regulation, of realization, consciousness of one's emotional states. They also check if a person is able to detect some areas where he is more vulnerable, where he lacks something, in order to interact with others more effectively, or work successfully, and so on.
So what is emotional intelligence, and how to learn to control your emotions? It is proven that in critical moments, heart rules over mind. Emotions steer us also when we are confronted with non-trivial tasks, which defy reason. Emotional intelligence helps us to get rid of stress in the situation of high uncertainty, to process information non-logically, to show charm and charisma.
The more a person has advanced emotional intelligence, the more difficult it will be to manipulate him. So, if there's a person that understands emotions and intentions, or the emotional intentions of his vis-a-vis, it's very difficult to manipulate him. Emotional intelligence is an ability, but this ability has no positive or negative value. And how a person will use this ability actually depends on his moral norms or his life principles, on how he wants to interact with society.
The model of emotional intelligence consists of 4 components. Self-knowledge. It means that we are able to identify our own emotions and don't take anger for irritation. Self-regulation. We know how to control our feelings and restrain impulses. Social skills. We build relationships with people, driving them to the needed decisions. Empathy. We consider other people's feelings while making decisions and are able to empathize with them.
If we're talking about adults, the measurements of emotional intelligence showed very interesting and unusual dynamics. It grows approximately until 30 years of age. It develops very intensively. And at 30, it reaches some sort of a plateau. And then after 50 years, the decline begins. And so our studies in senior and elderly people, aged from 55 to 90 years of age, show a considerable decline in the ability to recognize emotions, especially negative ones.
In psychology, inability to perceive and express one's own emotions is called Alexithymia. For such people, it is difficult to describe feelings with words. According to various studies, up to 25% of people suffer from Alexithymia.
In our Russian traditions, in many families, it is strongly cultivated not to discuss one's emotional experiences and feelings. It's very unhealthy, actually, because a person has to contain all this emotional strain, which has to be let out somewhere, but he doesn't know where to. Moreover, it has a very strong impact on his psychic health and psychic state. He can lose sleep, appetite, feel anxiety, or discomfort. It's advisable to talk to children about their feelings from very early childhood, to discuss your emotions with your significant others.
Most people suffering from alexithymia are men. Scientists believe that the reason for this may be the disruption of communication between brain hemispheres. Communication between the left and the right brain hemispheres is performed through the corpus callosum. It is a bundle of nerve fibers. In alexithymia, corpus callosum has microscopic damage. In such situation, the left hemisphere, which dominates in most people, starts playing even more of a leading role. The right hemisphere, which controls emotional expressions, becomes suppressed. The person dwells in a state of constant interhemispheric conflict. Concerning emotional intelligence, the way how people react to various communicative stereotypes. Women are more emotional and their emotional intelligence is more advanced. In men, logical intelligence is more pronounced.
Women always outrun the men. Actually, they created for this, to establish elaborate emotional connections within society, with others, with children, with their families, co-workers, friends, and so on. And men, they actually fall behind a little, but by the age of 40, they line up. And then the men start to somewhat surpass the women in some abilities, such as, for example, conscious control of own emotions. They're better at hiding their own emotions, at not expressing them as overtly as women do. Women have always been much worse at that.
When experiencing some emotion, for example, anger, we need to express it in thoughts, facial expressions, or actions. Such is the nature of emotions. They originate in us and are expressed through us. If emotion is not expressed, then it is suppressed. Such emotions, having no way out, start to destroy one's body, draining a person of his strength. And if proper utilization of this emotional energy doesn't occur, it becomes somatized, which means that in the first place, it leads to various health issues. First of all, cardiovascular system suffers, gastrointestinal tract, lungs, respiratory system, and musculoskeletal system. So it is very grave. Sooner or later, a physically drained person can't restrain his negative feelings anymore. Then the dam will break, and emotions will find their reflection in quarrels and scandals. How to become skilled in mastering your own emotions without psychic breakdowns? The first step is realization. What do I feel in the present moment? Life of every person is filled with hundreds of sensual and emotional overtones. The skill to distinguish them comes with training. The second step is the detection of appropriateness of emotion. Is it allowed, for example, to express anger in the workplace? As a rule, such actions are fraught with negative consequences. A classic example. In Japan, there exist dolls, which look like somebody's bosses. And if an employee wants, let's say, to shout at his boss, he cries not at the real boss, but at the doll. And he'll even beat it with a stick. It is worse if emotions stay inside you, especially the negative ones. Precisely, the suppression of emotions leads to different illnesses. That's why it is important to learn how to master one's emotions. The third step is specifically self-regulation. How does one deal with emotions if circumstances require it? Our feeling is a reaction to a definite event to which our body has to adapt. That is why emotions are accompanied by physiological changes. The pulse quickens, the blood pressure rises, the pupils dilate. In such a case, medical advice is to breathe deeply and steadily. It calms you down and shifts attention to bodily reactions. It is the ability to control emotions, to not let emotions possess you. It is a very subtle moment, but a very important one, because you mustn't extinguish emotions, as it is a way to A, inadequate behavior, and B, psychosomatization, but to master emotion, to not let anger lead me into trouble, which I will later regret. This is a very, very important skill of emotional competence. When we get into self-regulation, we become able to influence emotional states of other people. Recognizing our own feelings, we are able to feel our vis-a-vis just as subtly. For example, is it safe to trust him? We conducted an experiment. At first, we tested participants and evaluated their EQ. All were different, from low to high levels. The task was the following. Look at these photos. Though it is the same face, but some people have twins. It happens, and the question is simple. One of these people works in show business as a producer, and another one is in business. I ask you to take this very seriously and answer two questions. The first one is, to whom of these people you would trust your money, and with whom you would like to become friends? Red ticket means investments, yellow is friendship. Although there is the same person in the photos, they evoke different responses. In the first case, there is a formal suit, body half turned. In the second case, there is a frank look in the eyes and warm, sincere half smile.
I would trust my investments, in spite of his kind eyes, to him.
My money, I would have given to a person who looks serious as a businessman, goal-oriented.
I would make friends with this person, and I would trust him with my money as well. It's not necessarily a person in a suit is better at finances than my friend. He looks really simple and friendly. He has a pleasant look, and he makes eye contact.
Probably he is worth trusting money. But at the same time, I think he is an interesting companion. I'd rather make friends with this person. As soon as this is a businessman, so I think it is essential to trust money to him in order for him to increase capital. And why not to be friends with your investor?
I think I would make friends with this guy, because he looks like a person who knows something, something that I don't. That's why I think I would really enjoy being friends with him. As for my money, I would give my investments to this guy. Because if you need to invest in something, it's best to invest in some sort of lively business.
Eventually, participants with higher emotional intelligence decided that it is difficult to be friends with a businessman in a formal suit. But interestingly, they trusted money to the person in the second photo as well. Why did he invoke a lot of sympathy? We confirmed the hypothesis that a person with wider emotional expression, which is reflected in his face, in his non-verbal communication, facial expression, gestures, appears as more credible. Namely, in fact, that winning friends, this second, Yevgeny acquired not only friends, but additional capital as well. And in the first case, strict Yevgeny received only money and little friends. The ability to hear and understand one's own feelings is the basic component of emotional intelligence. To understand another person is a more complex task. How does emotional intelligence help us to communicate with others? It is generally thought that the higher the EQ of the team leader, the higher is the efficiency. But is it always so? We continued the experiment. The participants were divided into two teams. Let's imagine that we gathered here not for nothing, but for a reason. We need to survive on a deserted island. But again, as far as we study emotions and how people can coexist and communicate with each other, I suggest two captains. I take the liberty to appoint these captains. Murat is a sports coach. He is strict, goal-oriented, and reserved in emotional expression. Anastasia is a psychologist. She is, on the contrary, emotional, open, and prone to empathy. Her EQ results are somewhat higher. Who will be able to save the team in extreme conditions? While the ship has not sunken yet, the participants are suggested to take some emergency goods. There are 15 items, from the rod to the bottle of rum. Teams have 5 minutes to work out their survival plan. Firstly, I would take some canned food. Secondly, a mirror. Thirdly, a compass. And fifth, canned food. A map, an ocean map, and a compass. This I've already, what? Told you, a petrol can. Firstly, cans. What for? Cans? Canned food. To eat.
Look, this is what I was thinking. While we're trying to catch some sort of fish with this rod, we might get really hungry. So I have prioritized food.
Initially, the leaders choose different approaches to discuss the task. Anastasia tries to listen to every team member and looks a bit perplexed. Murat acts more authoritatively, trying to extinguish emotions of his subordinates.
At first, we thought that we need a rod, for sure. But while we're trying to catch some fish, we might actually get hungry. So, at first, we have, in first place, canned food, and only then the rod. Then we got plastic, which is very useful. We can do lots of things with it, so we've put it at third place. In fourth place, we listed a mirror, because one can create flashes of sunlight, and we might get noticed by other people. Then we chose the radio. And in sixth place, we've placed the petrol can. And of course, if we can hear on the radio that somebody is traveling anywhere near us, then we can quickly make a fire with the petrol can. Then, in last place, we have this rope, but we haven't really decided yet what we're going to use it for.
We had a very simple strategy. Firstly, to survive, and then to bail to safety. And firstly, we've chosen from these things food, as we need to gain strength. We agreed that we don't let any panic. Then we thought about what awaits us after our food and water supplies run out. In the second place, we've put a spinning. In the third, there is a petrol can. A piece of thick polyethylene to make a tent. A tent needs to be securely covered, rainproof, or even windproof. The rope we secure with polyethylene on the top, secure with plastic. And with the rope, we tie this wood, which actually holds the tent. Then, the seventh is a radio. The eighth is a compass. And the ninth, a map. 10th, a bottle of rum. There was an opinion, yes, a suggestion, as antiseptic. Chocolate bars, we placed them in the last place. Why? Because we will associate them with salvation and joy. We go away safe, and at this moment...
Eating chocolate?
Are eating chocolate, yes, are eating chocolate out of sheer joy. The Murad's team survival strategy on a deserted island looks much more convincing, which means that they have more chances for salvation. When he was assigned as a captain, Murad started to structure his team as a hierarchy. In extreme conditions, those win that team which is able to stick together very quickly. And speaking of Anastasia's team, her liberal, so to say, style of management in extreme situations didn't work out. What did this experiment show? We clearly see that in extreme situations, those people win whose discrimination threshold of emotional intelligence is actually rather narrow. And in extreme situations, such people are much more able to survive. But life doesn't consist of extreme conditions. High emotional intelligence of Anastasia as a leader will be indispensable in solving creative tasks. For example, when the team will need to show innovational thinking and creativity. To speak not only of extreme situations, but of everyday situations, it was Anastasia who demonstrated her level of emotional intelligence, which is connected to taking into consideration the positions of other people. Here we should say that there are no bad or good emotional reactions, and this is exactly what our experiment has shown. Is it possible to heighten one's EQ? Researchers note that it is never late to polish your level of emotional development. IQ stays almost the same with age. But emotional intelligence can grow, as personality is by 50% determined by genetics, and the second half of our nature is formed during life, and we can influence it. And here are two aspects. First is, of course, communication, where our emotions are expressed. In the first place, in communication with other people. So there has to be communication. On the one hand, such a rich emotional life has to continue up to the very end. On the other hand, there is physical basis. If my body is more or less vigorous even in old age, it is ensured by some care for the body, for the cardiovascular system. It is a system of some physical exercises. And if there will be better blood supply of the brain, then limbic structures will be more lively. To cultivate such component of EQ as empathy, psychologists advise to observe people carefully, to learn to understand body language, to practice the art of listening, to learn to capture the atmosphere in the room.
You have to start with the basics. You have to define the concept, how you define a certain emotion. For example, joy. What is it? How do I feel it? How is joy expressed in others? And how do I detect what the other person does feel, joy or anger or fear? And what is the reason for emotions in me or in the other person?
To get on with people, to understand others' reactions and to know how to predict it, to agree and to cooperate. Cultivation of emotional intelligence may take years, but if you continue training, the result is guaranteed. In order to succeed in life, one has to be very clever. It is just a stereotype as life shows. The correlation between IQ and success is weak, and leaders are usually the people with high emotional intelligence. Their skills in understanding feelings and emotions, their own and those of others, help them live according to their own scenario.